Ecstatic Bliss. Secrets to living a juicy life. Hello loves, welcome to today's episode of Ecstatic Bliss. Secrets to living a juicy life. And today we will dive into the ego, the concept of the ego. Why? Because on that journey, on your spiritual path, you will come across this ego multiple times. And it is either a blessing or a curse, and it can be a big blockage on the path to bliss. That is why I feel it is important right now, also in the beginning, to really give you some inspiration. As usually I always say, it's inspirations what I give. It's not something that you have to take for 100% that is your truth, because I'm just sharing from my own perspective and from my own experiences. So I would love to give you some insights into the ego, and especially also what the ego is here for, what its purpose is, why it's not always the evil, the villain of the storyline, but also how you can somehow get lost in the ego and let your soul be trapped. So in a way, I feel the ego can be very helpful in some situations, and in some situations it's just blocking your soul's evolution. It's blocking your view from your true essence. So coming back to the very basics, what is actually the ego? And you may have a blurred view of it, you maybe have a rough idea of it. For me, the ego is a false identification with concepts, with labels, with beliefs, with anything with what you identify with. So it's in a way also all that wrapping paper, what I was talking about in other episodes, the wrapping paper you give yourself, or that has been given to you, or maybe even imprinted in your being from ancestors, from past lives, and so forth. So ego is identification, especially with something, so you can feel yourself, you can have a grip of yourself. Who am I? So the ego usually forms when we form our identity, because we, in a way, need a mechanism that helps us to see, okay, this is me, this is you, this is him, her, this is the world. So that is also one purpose of the ego, why it is in place. We all have it. Yeah, there's no person without an ego. Even those having it transcended, I would say they still have it. They just have found a way to have made friends with it, in a way, where we come later to. So it's which concepts you give yourself, which labels you give yourself, which mental projections you put on yourself. So the ego has that purpose of helping us to identify with something so we feel ourselves. Yeah, if we zoom out a little bit, we are everything and nothing at the same time. And the creator, the universe, God, whatever word suits you, wants to experience itself through us. And so it needs some kind of definitions to find what's not the definition. So we always need the opposite to explore what we truly are. So that is one purpose, and especially also to navigate through life. Yeah, the ego helps us to navigate through life, to make decisions, also especially when it comes to survival things. That's why the ego has a lot of protection mechanisms in place that run automatically, even subconsciously, that we know, okay, this is the right path for me right now, this maybe not. This is where I have to run, or this is where I rather go in the fighting mode. So the ego is also in place from our evolution, that we can survive. It's a part in us that helps us to go into survival mode when we have to. When maybe, I don't know, when there are decisions to make that are to be made in milliseconds. And we don't have the time to ponder around, write it down, journal it out to make that decision, but it has to be right now. And it has to do with survival mode, with death or life. That's also a purpose, a very valuable purpose of the ego. And the third big purpose of the ego, I feel, is the intrinsic motivation to thrive, to be motivated to start something new, to transform your life, to set goals and want to achieve goals, to raise higher. Even rising your consciousness is in a way ego-based. Yeah, without judgment, actually. So first, I want you to put aside, if you have it, to put aside your judgment about the ego, which is sometimes in the spiritual scene, sometimes seen so much in the dark side, on the dark area, like, oh, the ego, we have to transcend it, we have to get rid of it, we have to just go and transition to pure consciousness and soul. But in the beginning here, I want you to make sure that you also understand the ego has purpose. Everything has a purpose when it's in our life. And we all have been given an ego. So the third, again, coming back to that, the third big purpose of the ego is motivation, thrive, and drive. It's in a way, sometimes your inner cheerleader, that part of you that keeps going no matter what. Sometimes that fights for your own rights, your own needs, your own desires, your own path. And what I noticed on my journey, actually, when I look back, is that the ego helped me a lot to free myself from how to put it, let's say it like from outdated societal, from the society patterns, from the matrix. Maybe you also want to listen to that or watch that episode about the matrix, freeing yourself. And I feel in this transitioning, when you are in the stuck state of living a life you don't really want to live, or being in a job, being in a relationship, whatever, that you feel very, very imprisoned and you want to get out of it, then the ego can be a very, very helpful tool or part inside of you that helps you to get in that zone of, I want to change something. I want to free myself. I deserve a better life. And therefore, also, I can say that even the ego is part of that spiritual journey in multiple senses. Yeah. And it's actually not always about getting rid of the ego, but to become friends with it. Later, I will talk about that more. So maybe a little bit more about what the ego is associated with, especially when we talk about it in the more darker side, is that we can put the ego on one hand and the soul on the other hand. And we usually have the ego being in the me, myself, and I, the soul more in the we, the separation and the oneness, fear and love, lack, attachment, control, all ego-based, and abundance, detachment, and trust on soul level. So we have those two forces sometimes as opposites, may be seen as opposites. And to know your soul, it's also good to know your ego. To know your ego, it's good to know your soul. Yeah, always being in this polarity game. And what the evolution on the spiritual path is about, is about becoming aware what the ego is, when the ego is in place, when the ego tells stories, when the ego is in victimhood, when the ego is distorting reality and your own truth. And finding back to your soul blueprint, to your soul essence, as I always say, aligning back to your essence. And finding that way more towards the soul. It's true, yes, we want to free ourselves from the very tight mechanisms of the ego that keep us looping in stories that are not truly what we are. And step into soul, which is connected to consciousness, which is connected to the divine, to love, oneness, and light, which is also the evolution of humankind, of society in general, when we think of transitioning from 3D to 5D. And I oftentimes somehow associate 3D a lot with the ego and maybe also more with the lower chakras, without judgment. It's just like something what I feel. And the transitioning to 5D is more, bringing the energy up to the upper chakras and harmonizing it as an eternal flow. It's not about just lowers or uppers or just the heart. It's in a way to connect all of it through the heart. So I feel like the fourth dimension in between third and fifth, between ego and soul, is opening our hearts, which is the switch, the key, the lock, as if you have like this, as if you had like the codes, typing them in, and you turn the knob of the door of the portal, and then you get the flow of energy between lower and upper chakras. So it's integration. It's not elimination. It's transcending in a way and integrating. And one issue maybe of the ego is what we want to become aware of. 3 beliefs that it usually has, what I already mentioned when I compared ego and soul, is that we have the ego feeling either in lack, in attachment, or in control. And if you have all of 3 in place, it's even more dominant in your life, obviously. And sometimes it depends on the life area. Sometimes it depends on our life phase, where what is more dominant. So if we live in lack, it's about bringing more abundance, consciousness into your life. If you live in attachment, yes, it's about detaching. It's also about making peace. It's also about making peace because attachment is connected with anger. And control is the third belief, or the third pattern we can get stuck in when we are too much in our ego. That is connected to tapping back into trust, trusting the universe, surrendering even maybe. So if the ego part of us feels lack, we are more in this flight mode. We want to run away. If we feel attachment, we are more into fight mode, into this is mine. I want to get it back. I want to hold on to it. And if we are in the control mode, we are in the mode of freeze. We don't know, maybe we're also fighting flight. So actually fight, flight, and freeze and fawn, if you want to take it in there, are mechanisms of the survival and protection mechanism of the ego that comes in place when we feel either lack, attachment, or control. It always comes back to that. And how often have you wanted to control things in your life? How often have you attached to things that maybe have already been years are already outdated, let's say it like this, are already outdated and keeping you in some old patterns, old thoughts, old beliefs that block your evolution. And how often have you been in lack of money? Oftentimes it's lack of money, it's lack of love, it's lack of care, it's lack of attention. So many things that are connected back again to the inner child that wants attention, that wants love. So oftentimes I feel also to make more peace with the ego is giving yourself what your ego needs, because beyond the ego, everything is connected, yeah? Beyond the ego lie needs, lie desires. And desires is kind of like a strong need, I feel. Very strong need, maybe not really necessary always. A need is really necessary usually. It's like I need food, I need water, I need care in the sense of touch, of hugs, of love. And desire is something maybe more the cherry on top. But nevertheless, both is underlying ego patterns and ego mechanisms, ego games, ego stories. So one part of stepping more out of the ego and stepping more into your soul back again, into divine consciousness, is to reflect upon your mechanisms and become aware of your patterns, become aware of your stories, become aware of when this part of the ego runs, what are the triggers, what are the situations or types of people that trigger an ego mechanism, an unhealthy ego mechanism. Because, back again, ego can also be helpful. So, not about getting rid of the ego, not about denying the ego, not about making the ego the victim or the villain of everything, but becoming friends with the ego, cultivating a healthy and conscious relationship with the ego, and rather actually using the ego for your benefit, for your spiritual growth, for your evolution, for expansion. We cannot expand if we deny something of ourselves. That we have an ego is a fact. In a way, it's a fact. So if you cannot get rid of it, and you don't have to, as I said, then become friends. Befriend what is already yours. If you deny something that's part of you, and you can transfer it to anything else if you don't like anything of your body, for example, but your body is part of you, you cannot change anything about that. Rather become friends and make peace with it than pushing it aside or down or being angry about it or trying to find solutions to get rid. Because you cannot. You can only transition. And the interesting thing is sometimes also in spirituality, in the spiritual bubble, it can happen that there's an in-between state, and some, I feel, get stuck in that state where the spiritual ego takes over the other ego, the more human ego maybe. Yeah. So there's a spiritual ego of, oh, I have mastered already this part. I've transcended my ego. I'm just here for love and light. I'm just serving. I'm just here to heal the world. Yeah, exaggerated. But some do have this image then of themselves. I'm the healer. I'm the shaman. I'm the whatever guru. And that's actually the spiritual ego that can take place then. Not always, obviously. Some really do a good job. But if it becomes, again, an identification with a far superior spiritual being that is floating over those who have the other ego, and you keep telling yourself the story, you tell others the story. Instagram is a good place to see those stories of the spiritual ego. And it's okay if you are there. There's also no judgment, but then own that. It's always about owning. I don't say that you have to be here or there or there or here or there. Find your own truth and be happy with that. The most important is that you are aligned and happy with yourself and your own reality, your own self and your own reality. It's never a destination or a specific goal, or it's not about enlightenment. It's always to be your authentic self in each moment. And to be your authentic self is coming back to your essence, is becoming back to your truth, is soul alignment, is love. I keep repeating that. Probably in each episode you will hear me saying this because it's so important for me. And it's my main message, actually, that whatever you do, whatever you think, whatever you feel, it always comes back to love. And also with the ego. What would happen if you embrace your ego with pure love? If you wouldn't finger point, you are the villain. If you embrace that part of yourself. Because it serves a purpose, it has helped you in the past. It also, maybe it became bigger when you had traumatic experiences that can happen multiple times, even in lifetime. Then it becomes maybe overprotective, but for the purpose of your own safety. So there also maybe helps self-compassion, self-love, embracing that part and taking it like a little brother or something like that just wants the best for you. Because then transcendence can start. Then you see, oh, this is where my ego acts, or interesting, this triggered somehow an ego mechanism. Become interested in how you work, your system works and functions. You can zoom out of it and you can zoom in again. Zooming out is also a very valuable mechanism or tool to see, oh, this is my ego, this is my soul. As if you observe and weigh and balance ego, soul, coming back to center, to your heart. And again, it's not about getting rid of your ego. It's about becoming friends. And that's the main message, actually. So maybe you have awaited some tools and tips to get rid of the ego. For me, it's not about that. It's about becoming aware of it, knowing which stories and identifications you have from it, which are distortions, which are healthy, which are blocking, which are helpful, discerning, and then more consciously relating to your ego with self-compassion, with self-love, integrating it into your being to become whole, to be whole, to feel yourself whole and expanded. And from there, shifting to your soul essence. That is what I wanted to share today with you. I hope you got some inspiration to see the ego from another perspective. Yes, there are ego games, but there are also games of love that you can play with the ego. So much love and bliss for you. I hope to see you next time again here in Ecstatic Bliss.